Today we are discussing permissible, movable, tiny homes. That's right. On this channel we talk a lot about Appendix Q and how that is helping us permit permanent foundation tiny homes. But what if you already own your own movable tiny home? Can you get it permitted?
And now that these communities have done this, it's sort of taking off nationally. Movable tiny houses are legal.
As we continue to make the movement move, we're seeing more cities adopt ordinances that are allowing permissible, movable, tiny homes. Now, are they looked at as ADUs or single family dwelling units? Well, they're looked at as both. And I'm so excited today to announce our guest. I had the pleasure of interviewing Dan Fitzpatrick, who is the president of the Tiny Home Industry Association. Dan and his team have created extraordinary leaps and bounds with permitting tiny homes, whether that's on a permanent foundation or keeping them movable, so keeping them on their trailer. And today we're talking, how did you do it? What are the steps that you took? What exactly is a movable tiny home? And how can you as well partake in this change? So I'm really excited to bring this really relevant content to you today. So let's get into it.
Movable tiny houses have about 5-6 years ago started off as pretty much a cottage industry in people's backyard and garages. And today it's we probably have a couple hundred builders building a number of units per year nationally, and the movable tiny house movement has taken off. These are not glorified RVs. These are basically units that are built like any other stick-built house. It just happens to be on wheels.
So then, if they are really not considered an RV or a recreational vehicle, what would you call these homes?
And so what's happening around the country is I've been working with a lot of states and communities to get them to understand and recognize that there is this new product called the movable tiny house, and that yes, we still have to use standards that are available nationally, principally related to the RV industry, but use them as a base and then add additional criteria in state law or local ordinances say that they have to look like and be designed like a tiny house. They have to have certain insulation values. They have to have certain criteria to make sure that they truly are habitable units, not seasonal recreational units. So in the past 2 years, we've been able to legalize movable tiny houses as legal habitable dwelling units, as accessory dwelling units in a number of the big cities in California.
Okay.
That includes Los Angeles, San Diego, San Jose, Fresno, and some smaller communities like San Luis Obispo.
Mm-hmm.
Also, a couple counties like Humboldt County and Santa Clara County, Santa Clara County being the Silicon Valley of California, have all approved these units as habitable dwelling units. And now that these communities have done this, it's sort of taking off nationally. In the past year, the state of Maine basically took the language we did for LA and put it in state law. Movable tiny houses are legal, and one can build, sell them, and live in them in Maine. And we're also working with a number of other states right now, Minnesota, Missouri, Florida, Texas, hopefully here shortly, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, to make them much more tiny friendly in terms of the utilization of movable tiny houses. And so once we get it passed in a couple places, it'll start snowballing across all the 50 states.
And where did this all start?
First ordinance I wrote was in Fresno almost 5 years ago. And it has gotten better each time we write, an ordinance. And so that, and now the states are starting to pick it up. And once a couple states put it into their laws, their statutes that permit movable tiny houses, they'll have standards to which these units must be built. And that'll create sort of, for lack of a better word, national criteria for these units to separate them from say a park model RV.
So would you say that we're focusing more of our efforts on permitting these movable tiny homes as ADUs, which is an accessory dwelling unit, or are we trying to take it in a different direction and really get these homes permissible on their own parcel?
Right now, what most of the cities have done, and the counties I'm working with, have made them legal as accessory dwelling units. Now, I'm working with a number of communities on the next phase of, can we put movable tiny houses as standalone units on maybe small lots or in a clustered planned unit development type project. So I'm working with several communities to come up with draft language to permit that. And just like the accessory dwelling unit ordinances, the communities will start stealing from each other on those types of things. So it's a matter of a couple communities just starting to do it, laying it out, creating ordinances and design criteria for how one could develop, site, and utilize these units in a like a tiny house village community setting.
So let's dig into looking at these homes, these movable tiny homes as accessory dwelling units. What does that look like? What kind of laws and rules and regulations will we be held to?
Well, in general, right now, the cities and counties that I've been working with in California, we're using any place where you can put an accessory dwelling unit, you can also put a movable tiny house. And that's only in those counties and cities that have authorized it, like LA and San Diego. So, you're not going to be putting them in front yards. You don't put accessory dwelling units in front yards. They generally are backyard cottages, for lack of a better term. So that's generally wherever you can place an accessory dwelling unit in the state of California legally, you should be able to place a movable tiny house if that city or county has so authorized it.
I know one question that I am constantly asked is, if we're able to get them permitted as an ADU, what does that hookup look like? Are we able to use a composting toilet? Would solar be something that might be included? And I know this is probably going to be per jurisdiction because every city has their own rules and regulations as far as connecting to city water and sewer. But what are your thoughts on this?
Most of the cities and counties have required that one hook into the municipal water, sewer, and electric, system of their cities. Now, with that said, is in some of the ordinances, especially the county ordinances, because they have more rural areas, they allow sanitation. It could be into a septic system or other systems that can be approved by the environmental health department of their county. In other words, if you have a way of handling composting toilets and your gray water to dispose of it legally, you take it down to your health department and get approval, for it. It's hard to write in an ordinance every situation you come into. You have to refer back to, usually in most counties, and this is even nationally, you defer to your local health department to give approvals for those types of facilities. As it relates to electric, remember, hooking up an electric to a movable tiny house is very easy. You just, dig a trench 16 inches down, run basically an extension cord, and you two are in business. And if nothing else, is a backup to your solar system. No one's going to prevent you from having utilizing a solar system in your backyard. But in terms of, let me digress here a minute. In terms of a practical point, if you're in a backyard, what most clients are finding that are building these things are finding that it just is not cost effective to put a full solar system on their unit. Your electric utilization per month is so low, it would take you 100 years to, recoup the cost of a solar system. With that said, you can get the little kits that you can, put in a yard, and hook up, some of your stuff to, if you want to be solar. But to have a complete some of the systems I've seen working are where someone has literally built their house that there is no access to the grid. And then they put on the whole Tesla wall and, the solar panels on the roof. And even though if they had access to electricity, it wouldn't be cost effective. But since this is their only power, this is the only way it can work. It's really hard to recoup $10,000 to $15,000 of a solar system when you're only spending $35 to $50 a month on a power bill.
So I know a big question folks are probably considering right now is, this is all great, but what are these costs looking like in order to obtain these permits for the tiny home?
Well, it depends city by city. Each city has their different fees and charges and requirements. Most cities, for siting a movable tiny house, is they want it, one, to be put on some kind of a pad. It could be concrete, it could be paved, it could be compacted gravel, but something that will hold the weight of the unit. They don't want the unit to be sinking into mud, right?
Okay, right.
Number two is they want it hooked into the water, sewer, and electric system of the main house, and that's mainly a trenching requirement. And then three is that they generally want the unit skirted, hide the wheels. And some, especially here in California, a number of the communities are requiring the skirting to be made of fireproof, fire-resistant material, so embers can't get under a unit and cause the whole unit to catch on fire. So those are principally your requirements. It could be anywhere from a couple $1,000s to $10,000. It depends on the city, but it's certainly a lot cheaper than if you were doing a foundation-based house in the backyard.
So do you think it will be a requirement to have the tiny home tied down? And do you think that you'll have to hire a structural engineer to create those plans?
I haven't seen one that requires tie downs yet. Now, with that said, is if I were in a earthquake area or a high wind, area, it probably wouldn't hurt to, as you're building your unit or working with your builder on a unit, that the trailer itself, come with what we call D-rings, on the trailer that you can easily hook up either straps or turnbuckle bolts, to tie down into a ground system. It could be concrete, it could be the big screws, that go into the ground as an anchor to keep it stable in certain types of situations. Again, work with your local building code people. It's not that big of a deal to, tie something down if you want. Remember, I mean, if I were setting up a unit, I would, jack it up so that my wheels were barely an inch off the ground, because you don't want them to dry rot. Drop it down then on piers. Put a couple straps down to sort of hold it in place. And the worst case scenario is if in an earthquake and whatever, it falls off the piers, what is it going to land on? It's going to land on four. It's going to land on 4 or 6 great big rubber tires. You'll bounce around. You'll bounce around a little bit, but it isn't going to cause much damage.
So when going through the permitting process, will you need to submit, structural, plumbing, and electrical, and perhaps site plans in order to receive your permit for your tiny home?
Well, yes and no. Remember, the units themselves, a movable tiny house, say in a backyard in LA, that allows movable tiny houses. Remember, these units are going to be signed off on by an independent third-party inspector that's going to say that they are built to the standards that are in the city ordinance, usually 1195 ANSI code, plus a few other requirements, right? So you don't have to submit plans to the city for the structure. The beginning and the end of the plans you submit to the city for approval are things related to the pad it sits on and how you're connecting the water, sewer, and electric lines, to the unit. They're not inspecting the unit. They're not reviewing plans whatsoever. Now, if you did a stick-built house in the backyard, yes, you have to hire an architect, have plans, take the plans in, get them approved, go build a foundation, etc.
Right.
And
Okay.
just those processes alone in California is I can have a movable tiny house up and running in a backyard in 90 days versus the same unit, if it's on a foundation, stick build, will take 18 to 24 months just to get all the inspections through. Add another 20 to 30% on your build to do it as a stick built unit built in accordance with the International Residential Code versus building units of that are in these ordinances that are considered movable tiny houses.
A question I have from the builder's perspective, in order to obtain that permit or in order to help your clients obtain that permit, will that builder, the tiny home builder, need to be RV certified in order to have the unit placed?
Well, it's not RV certified. What it is it's that the unit itself is certified to either 11.9.2 of the NFPA code or the 11.9.5 ANSI code. And there's a number of independent third-party firms that are certified inspection firms that will inspect your unit as it's being built. And at the end, you will get a sticker that it's built to 11.9.5 or it's built to 11.9.2 and meets the other requirements in the local, ordinance.
So speaking on third-party inspectors, will NOAA, which is the National Organization of Alternative Housing, be an acceptable third-party inspector?
Third-party firm is accepted in a number of areas, but again, each city has their own internal requirements for who they will accept as third-party inspectors. Here in California, some cities refer to a list that's available at the Department of Housing and Community Development. Again, before you hire a builder or build a unit, find out what the local requirements are and make sure your builder is building the units in accordance with those, laws and requirements, and two, that the certification company they use is accepted by that city.
Okay.
Right? Some cities accept almost anybody. Other cities are very choosy. So you got to do your research up front. I'll give you an example. In San Luis Obispo, the requirements for a fire escape window are different than LA. So you've got to, builders here in California that know the difference have a San Luis Obispo model versus an LA model.
This has been such a great learning experience. And I know some folks are probably like really gearing up to say, okay, yeah, today, 2021, this is when I'm going to start the journey to legalize tiny homes in my own city. So with looking at all of the requirements, from the builder's perspective that the city's going to need, and then looking at the jurisdictional laws and regulations, how would somebody find out where their local laws and regulations relating to tiny homes are? Like, where can they find this information out? Does THIA have kind of like a main hub that breaks it down state by state?
Well, we have access to our website that has information state by state, but it gets very difficult to stay up to date on what everyone's doing. Remember, there's 50 states. That's easy. But there are 89,000 municipalities in the United States.
Right.
By the time I get information on all of them, it's time to start over. So we try to put on our website basic information that we have available that you can click on California, and then it'll take you to the ordinance, the actual ordinances and the websites in LA or San Diego that you can check it out yourself. But it's, these are some of the questions that as a buyer of a tiny home, you need to put your builder through the process to make sure that they've done and, get it in writing that they're certifying that the unit they're building will meet the requirements of where they plan to put it. I was reading on a Facebook post the other day where a young lady was building a unit from some builder in Montana or Wyoming or someplace, and it was going to be placed in LA or San Diego, one of the cities that permits movable tiny houses.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I did some quick research and found out that the builder and what they were building wouldn't meet the criteria for that city. I mean, you got to ask the right questions and do your own research.
Yes.
Because you, the user, know where you plan to put it. And so you got to make sure what you're buying. I mean, it would be like buying a car for California that doesn't meet the California admissions control standards. It's like anything else. But what we also do, and let me put it in a plug here for the Tiny Home Industry Association, you can be an individual member for $25, and that puts you in charge of or in touch with not only all of our webinars and training programs that we have available, but it also allows you to join we have a Facebook website for members only, where they're constantly sharing information and asking questions amongst each other to help avoid, some of the issues that a future user or current user may be running into on siting their unit or how to pick a builder. You're now talking to peers around the country to do this. So it's a very good investment of your $25. So just go to the Tiny Home Industry Association website and sign up as an individual member.
So let's say that no one else has started to lay this groundwork and our dear viewer is saying, okay, it looks like it's going to be me that's going to push this endeavor forward. Where do they start? How do they begin this process?
Well, that's a 3-hour conversation. That's why we have, I did a workshop that has 3 parts. Each are about 40 minutes each, on how to advocate for tiny homes in your local community. And it's a whole training program that's available again to the, for your $25. You can, if you join THIA, you can participate, you can download and listen to all of the ways and how to do the research necessary and work with your local government officials to make change. The reason I was able to be very successful in these various cities is I bring to the table the knowledge on how to write the ordinances, but I had local folks in LA and in San Diego that found a couple councilmen that were tiny friendly. They opened up the door, and then they invite me in to close the deal.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So you need the boots on the ground to do the research on, I found that our local planner loves tiny homes, or the new mayor got elected as tiny friendly. Well, pick up the phone and call me, and we make introductions, and pretty soon they have on their desk, draft ordinances on how it could be done in their city. Because I'm working with cities from Atlanta to Raleigh to Durham to places in a number of places now in Florida and Texas on doing just that, on writing ordinances. And it all comes from the local government, local folks that have touched base with their local elected officials that make the proper introductions, and then we get things done. So join THIA for $25 and you can have 3 hours of seminars on how to do it. Right. Well, thank you for your hard work there in my old stomping grounds of Las Vegas. I used to be the assistant county administrator and the assistant city manager there in Las Vegas, before you were born. You're on the right track with Las Vegas. Get them approved, Appendix Q. And then the next step is we'll go after them for movable tiny houses. All right, take care.
So if you are the one that is starting to really look at your state or even just your city for allowing, permissible, movable tiny homes and you need more help, I definitely would suggest either reaching out to myself or reaching out to THIA and joining their membership. For $25 on an annual membership, you're able to have access to tons of information, just a wealth of knowledge that can really help you move forward. But more importantly, you'll be able to have access to a network of folks that have already done this before. So if you need more help, I would definitely suggest THIA. And I would definitely encourage you to subscribe, as we are bringing out relevant content that's really helping make the tiny home movement move every Tuesday. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in. It's been such a pleasure to be able to sit in front of you every week and bring you this relevant content. I wish you nothing but the best, and you know what to do. Keep it groovy. Have a great day, you guys.